Hello, hello. All right, let's make sure I've got audio. I do. Thank you, Ernest. I'm like, let me make sure I got audio. So we're gonna let's see here. To start off, let's start off with our video. Bear with me a moment. Let me see if I can get. Alright, good evening, Jerry. Good evening, Ernest, James, David, Ronnie, Peter, William. How are y'all doing this evening? Okay, we're gonna hold on. Huh. Alright, let's see y'all. We should be okay. Look at that face of mine going, what in the world is happening here? We should be streaming. I don't think we're going to have as many problems this evening with buffering. If we do, let me know. I'm trying some recommended settings and all, so we'll see how we go from there. We'll do our best to make this as smooth as possible. So tonight, basically, for the lack of better, not having an idea in my mind where I wanted to go with a project or anything, I thought that because we do have a lot of new users, we had a great show this past weekend in Boonville, New York. I think we sold 8 units at the show and stuff, and then over the past couple weeks, customer picked up his unit today from Burl over at Digital Woodcarver. So we got a lot of newcomers coming in. Hopefully they're able to get into the class this evening to kind of see what that's all about. But I thought we would do a Q&A, a live Q&A where you guys and girls could ask questions on about any obstacles that you've come across in your Vectric software and things. Now you can ask questions about TNG and stuff. I do not have TNG on this computer to be able to open it up and things, but I'll do my best to try to answer those type of questions and things as well. But I do have my Vectric on standby in case I need to demonstrate something, and to help answer a question. But I thought we would do a little bit of live Q&A, and that way I can also kind of probe some questions to you guys and stuff that I'm about to be putting some information out there on the web. Kind of get your thoughts as my select few that come in and attend these classes and stuff. And then I'm going to put it out there to everyone in the group, and then of course everyone in the forum, and then all the digital woodcarver owners. We're going to send an email and talk about an event that we're thinking about holding coming up, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. But if you experience any problems with audio or anything, let me know. I'm using a new broadcaster, and there's a slight delay between what you're seeing and what I'm doing. So if I have this puzzled look on my face when you ask your question, that's because they haven't caught up with one another yet. But one of the things is with my broadcaster is my live chat isn't working in the broadcaster, but it's working here on YouTube. I can see all your questions. Absolutely, Jerry. Hey, Jerry Burl and them told me they had the pleasure of doing a little tour with you, and you hanging out with them this weekend. Thank you very much for your time at the show. It's wonderful, and I'll definitely be sure to, if anyone ever needs a hand or something, reach out to see if you were able to help or answer a question or something like that. But I want to thank you for your time, and I got to see Burl shared a picture with me of a project that you made, a bowl and stuff. That was phenomenal, very cool stuff. So thank you again for that, and thank you for attending tonight's class. But yeah, no, things are going well with cells and all. And let's before we jump into the question answer, get your questions and all ready and stuff in your mind, what you want to ask and all. But before we get into that, I will post this out via audio. Then I'm going to put out a survey in the group, and then I'm going to be sending out a newsletter. So if you get the same email of something that you saw in the group, it's because not all the customers are in the Digital Woodcarver Owners group, and so we're sending out an email as well. But come the I believe we're looking at the last 2 weeks in October or the first 2 weeks in November. Not sure. More so probably the first 2 weeks in November. We are planning on doing a traveling somewhere and holding a little gathering, kind of a customer appreciation gathering, where we're going to be doing some live training, hands-on training. We're going to have whatever conference little center that we choose. It might be some kind of conference hall at a hotel or something to have people come out, and we'll probably be out there for a weekend, maybe a Saturday and Sunday, and do some classes. Do some beginner and advanced classes, do some hands-on. Burl's going to be teaching some maintenance. We're going to have a couple of machines set up and things, and Burl's going to be teaching some maintenance tips and things, and we're going to talk about, stuff with the machines. There's going to be items that we have, where of course we're going to bring some of our inventory and stuff, items for sale. But we're thinking about holding this, and, what we're curious of is, if something like that, if we start setting that up and doing, those type of kind of customer related shows where we actually just go out, we set up a conference where people can come out and get some one-on-one training, group training, hands-on type of training. If something like that sounds at all interesting to you, the classes and all to be able to come out, we're thinking right now for our first two locations. One for the southern area. The southern area would be in Florida, here in Ocala, Florida, and then we're going to do a central area, which is in Indiana. Those are going to be kind of our first start, and then we're going to try to get to other areas where our customer base is, which our customers are spread out everywhere, but we're going to have an east, a west type show, central, south, and things. But for the first two, to get our feet wet with this type of thing, we're thinking, southern. We may start with Florida and then do Indiana, and then after that, spread our wings and hit the east and west coast as well and stuff. But the participation to come out for the one-on-one weekend of training, hands-on learning, maintenance training, software training, just in general, very informative type conference. Be able to provide recordings for all the participants and stuff, so they can refer back to it and all. There would be a fee to come out. It would be $150 for the weekend, and that would cover miscellaneous expenses, snacks and beverages and things, for the conference. And so let me know in the comment section if something like that sounds at all appealing to you, to be able to come out and attend. Vetric does that. They do it once a year. Burl and the guys and I are going to be attending the Vetric conference in October in Chicago. We're flying out to attend that conference in Chicago for some continued education on our ends, with the new Vetric 9.5 releases and things and all. And we thought, it would be really nice if we did something like that for our customers. If we set up, and went somewhere and brought some machines out and just did that weekend of learning, where you could get some really in-depth, hands-on training between myself, Terry, and Burl. Burl on the mechanical side of things and software, the beginning and all, and then myself, in the software side of things, because mechanical is, I've got a pretty good handle on it, but that's Burl and Terry. They build them and stuff, so that would be their realm. But we don't know. I'm gonna be putting together a curriculum, and I'm gonna be putting together the kind of the event schedule and stuff, and we're gonna release that out. But in the meantime, we're gonna put out a survey in an email and in the Digital Woodcarver Owners Group, just to kind of get feedback, and so we can also look and see what areas we should kind of think about mapping out and stuff. And so it would be held that way. William, good question. Would Indiana and Florida events be a repeat of one another or new content each? Right now, I mean, because they're so spread out and things, the curriculum would pretty much be the same. But because of the environment and everything, because we're going to encourage individuals to bring their computers with them if they have laptops and things, bring their computers out, and we're going to be doing some in-depth projects and stuff, some hands-on at the machines and all. It may change up a little bit, but for the most part the curriculum would probably follow the same kind of realm. And then of course, when we return back to that area, that next year or whatever the case may be, or that next time around, it would be a completely different curriculum. So that way we wouldn't be attending, or people who attended, like let's say Florida, next year, then come back to Florida and attend, and it be the same thing that they were the last time. We would have different curriculum and stuff, of course. But as far as from one event to the other, like say Florida to Indiana, for the most part, it would probably be let's call it 90-10%, 90% the same curriculum and stuff. But because of the group dynamic, and the different questions that are posed, the different types of events and all, we're looking to have some guest speakers come out for things like finishing tips, you know, and you know, proper, you know, how to finish your projects and stuff like that. Looking to get some experts out, you know, in those areas and all. And because of that, there would be some difference. You know, there'd be some difference and stuff and all. So it would be different. But I believe if you attended, like, let's say Florida or Indiana, you'd be getting the same information as the people that attended Florida or Indiana. You know, it wouldn't be like you would go to Florida, then you would go to Indiana, then you would go here, then you would go there. That, you know, that wouldn't, you know, make a whole lot of sense. We want to try to, we'd love to get you to come out to whatever event is closest to you, and we're going to try to make the events to where our population of customers, where we hold the event, it's not very far for travel. So the Florida, all the way to Georgia, North Carolina, and all, they're only, you know, 5-6 hour drives to the location and stuff. Tampa, South Florida, and things, the Panhandle, all of that stuff. It would be, you know, 5 or 6 hour drive if they wanted to drive. People could fly out if they wanted to, but, you know, mostly drive out and spend the weekend and stuff and all. And so, you know, they could do the 1 day or 2 day. We'd encourage, you know, the 2 day event, of course. And so anyway, that's just throwing it out there. William, that's a great question. Discount for spouse attendance, or, you know, a co-worker or family or friend. I don't know. That's a great question. I wouldn't think so, but don't hold me to that, because that would be a question for Burl in them, because that little bit of money that we get from the attendees goes towards accommodations, food, beverage, the you know, conference and things like that, and help offset some of the costs and all, bringing the machines out and all. So I'm not sure if there would be a discount. But it's a great question, and it's a question I could absolutely ask. I've got a notepad to write some of these things down, and that's what the survey is going to be for. That's what the email is going to be for, so that we can get this feedback and we can kind of figure out. But we're looking at, Burl says more so the first 2 weeks in November is when we would do the event. And our first event is going to be a home-based type event, where it would either be Florida or it would be Indiana. It's one of those two. Not sure which one would be first, but it's going to be one of those two. And those are things that we'll put out all that information. So I want you to noodle that around in your head, think about it and stuff. I'm going to be putting up a survey and things in the Facebook group. We're going to be sending out an email, and we would love your response, feedback, and questions like that. William, are great questions to ask, and you know, those are questions that we can get answers to. So I will definitely look into that, and you know, we'll go from there. So let me make sure I got everything ready to go here. Do I have everything ready to go now? Phone is turned off, microphone is on, Dr. Pepper in hand. All right, I'm ready. I think here we go. Okay, so now, I want you guys, that was just something to throw out some preliminary information, but let's go ahead and let's get into our Q&A portion of this event. So who wants to kick it off first? Anybody? And my guest speaker tonight is me. I don't have any guest speakers tonight. Yeah, David, I'm sure. Yeah, there. You know, we're gonna come across that, and then of course, we're also getting closer to the end of the year with holidays and everything, and all. We'll definitely keep that in mind, for sure. You know, about other events and stuff going on in that area and all, especially for the individuals that do you know, sell with their products and stuff, and they have to attend their craft shows and things like that to, you know, their booths and stuff to make some money. We'll definitely keep stuff like that in mind. All right, let's kick it off here. James is thinking of upgrading to Aspire. Better to get through you or straight through Vectric. You can't get it straight through Vectric. Vectric would direct you to purchase it through us. All of your upgrades and everything, whether you have desktop and you're upgrading to Pro, or you have desktop and you're upgrading to Aspire, or you've got Pro and you're upgrading to Aspire, your upgrades would be purchased through us. So they would direct you. If you reached out to Vectric to upgrade, they would look at your account that you registered. They would see that you were a Digital Woodcarver customer, and they would direct you to purchase your upgrade through us. So James, you would purchase your upgrade through us, and you can purchase your upgrades on the website, or you can call in and do that. Great question. Peter was trying to do a knife handle with a textured finish. You think you figured it out, could give you some ideas. Now, Peter, were you doing this in a VCarve Pro desktop or Aspire? Were you modeling your handles in like an Aspire situation, or were you doing just kind of a straight, you know, handle design through VCarve Pro and then trying to do some kind of texturing and stuff in that route? Let me know, and we'll go from there. Welcome, Todd. Desktop. Okay. So desktop and Pro are pretty much going to be the same thing. They have the same tools and stuff that would be available to you. So let's go ahead and switch over to the desktop environment, and let's look and see what we can come up with. All right, so we'll start off with, excuse my rudimentary drawing here, but we'll start off with, let me at least make some kind of knife handle design. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a rectangle, and I'm going to go into a node editing, and let's see here. Actually, I'll start with a fillet tool first, and we'll kind of bring that around that way. And now I'll go into node editing, and let's see here. I will take and insert a point right about here. Let's pull that back some. I will take and select this node here and this node here, and I'll hit the letter X on my keyboard to pull that node into alignment. Let's give this a Bezier curve. Let's kind of curve this a bit. All right, let's see here. I'm going to take this and take this circle, select this, and open up my alignment tool and align, not that way, Control Z, get back here. Let me do it this way. Let me grab this and get right about in the center there. There we go. That way I can pop this in the center there, and if I hold my alternate key while I and my control and alternate key, I can drag this straight down and keep it in alignment. And let's go right about there. So terrible drawing of a knife handle, freehand, but you'll get the idea. Alright, now, so there's a lot of different ways that we can do textures. We could do a checker pattern. We could do a texturing toolpath. The texturing toolpath, not sure how that would look. Let's kind of do both. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to offset the handle inward about 1/8 of an inch to kind of create this little center area here. That'll be kind of my texture area, and we'll kind of go from there. And guys, keep your questions coming. Like Vern, your question will be next, and I'll keep your questions coming, and you know, we'll keep those going. All right, so let's start off with a very simple texture pattern. I'm going to start off with drawing a line, and I'm going to kind of draw a line diagonally, such as that. And I'm going to take that line and make it a little bit longer. Hold down my shift key and a little bit longer. There we go. And I'm going to take and offset that. And I'm going to offset that. I'll start in both directions. This will be my center line in a sense. So I will offset out 1/8 of an inch. Don't need straight corners. Select the new. And I will offset that out and just keep going till I get to there. I will go back and select my middle line again, and this time I'll offset outward, and I will go ahead and get that going. From there, I will take my offset lines that I've created, and I will open up my mirror tool, and I will create a mirror copy, and I will flip it horizontally, not that way. Scroll Control Z, turn off flip about job centers, and then flip it horizontally. That'll give me that cross hatch pattern there. Now I will group that together with the other cross hatches. With all of those selected, let's go in and select all of them. Hold down my shift key and grab these guys here. Alright, and I will, with those, I will group those together, and I will go ahead and let's see the best way to get around these handles, or these little rivet holes. Let me select my inside border. Let's grab this circle first, this circle second, and my inside border. Come on, get in there. Let me zoom in. There we go. I'll group those together. That'll be my second item. So now I can take and select my outside vectors. Those are the items that I want to trim. I will select my border and my holes. Those are what I want to trim. And I'm going to clear the inside, or the outside, should I say, of that boundary. And it should, with having these inside vectors, it should clear those on the inside. We'll find out here. So let's go ahead and do that. Perfect. All right. And so that will give me kind of a checkered pattern. You see that there. And we'll let's now come over here, and with these vectors selected, this will be a profile toolpath. Anytime you follow a line, it's a profile toolpath. And whenever you're following a single line, profile toolpath. And excuse me, we're gonna go, I'm gonna go very shallow with this, probably 1/16 of an inch, and I'm going to use a V-bit. A very tight V-bit would be nice. All I have is a 60-degree V-bit, but you know, like a 22 or 11 degree would be really nice for something like this. We're going to be on the line, and we're going to calculate this. We'll call this texture 1, and hit calculate. And let's kind of zoom in here. We can preview that selected toolpath. Let's turn the color off. And let's get into a maple or something so we can kind of see what's happening here. And then finally I will do my profile. Oops, I got to do my holes. So let's ungroup this and then turn off this inside vector right here, so just my holes are selected. That will be either a drilling operation or a pocket, because this is going to be bigger than my 1/4 inch end mill, because probably I drew it that way. I'm just going to do it as a pocket toolpath. Going to go all the way through my material, and in this case, you'd probably be working with 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch material. You don't want your handles to be too thick and bulky, but my board's set up for a 3/4 of an inch at the time, so kind of bear with me on that one. And so we'll calculate that. Alright, so my tool can't fit in there, so let's go back to an 1/8 inch end mill. So that will be my 2 little rivet holes, and then of course my profile toolpath, cutting through my material outside of the line using whatever end mill. I'll use my 1/4 inch end mill for this. Most likely we'd have tabs, but in this case I'll go that route. And so we would end up with that type of textured handle. Now let's clean up that view, go into toolpaths and simulation quality. Let's kind of step up that quality a little bit, and let's preview all those toolpaths one more time to clean that view up so it's not so pixelated. Alright, and so that would be one method. Now I could also do a nice little V-groove around the edges where these lines terminate. If I did that, I would take this line here. It would be a profile toolpath. Once again, we're following a line. On this, it would be a small amount. I'd probably go about a 32nd, 03125, maybe a 16th as well, but I don't want it bleeding in too much of the other edges and these little V's and stuff here. Again, that would be with my end mill. This would be a perfect opportunity for a small V-bit, 22 degree, 11 degrees, something like that, but the 60 will work fine. Let's go ahead and kind of zoom in and pull this over, and let's preview that selected toolpath. Let's see here. Did I choose a ball nose? Hold on a second. I chose a ball nose, not a V-bit like a dumb, but V-bit. There we go. Let's calculate that one more time, and let's preview all those toolpaths once again. So that is one way of doing a simple texture in the Vectric VCarve software for a type of and yeah, I do want that that cut to be a 1/16 of an inch as well. So let me drop that in there and calculate that and preview that cut again. There we go. And so that would be one way to create a a texture, kind of a simple textured handle. And then finally I'll do one more, and then we'll move on to the next question. Let's go ahead and I'll create a new layer for this. I will call this texture 2. And I'm going to take all of these guys, all of these guys here. I'm going to turn off my holes. And with that selected, I'm going to move that to a new layer, and I'm going to call this checkered or hatch, whatever you want to call it. And I don't need it visible right now. Alright, so the second texture option would be basically taking and selecting those inside vectors and using our texture toolpath. Now, of course, we have other textures. You know, we have the texturing 2D creator, line creator in the drawing tools over here that you could use to come up with some things. You could create some geometric shapes, whatever you want to do. In this case, we're just kind of doing a little light texture. Now, with this one, I'm going to actually use a ball nose bit. I'm going to use a 1/8 inch or a 1/16 inch. It's a small handle, so I'll go with a 1/16 inch ball nose for this. And start depth is going to be 0. Maximum depth of cut that I want to do is I'm going to vary between a 1/16 of an inch and a 32nd. Between those two depths, the length of cut, I'll go with a 1 inch length to a 1/2 inch length. That variation between those two, I'll do a 10% overlap, and I want to step over half the diameter of my bit, so I'll step over a 32nd, and I'll go at an angle. Let's go a little dramatic. We'll go with about a 20-degree angle on this, but I don't want it to get too close to my holes or my inside vector there, so I will come in and I will create an offset distance of a 1/16 of an inch away from that. And so I will calculate that toolpath. And if we reset that preview, let's kind of zoom in to that. If we preview that particular toolpath there, and then of course we've got our drill operation, which is our pocket. Let's preview that. And then our final cutout, let's preview that. And so, you know, we can come up with some type of hand-hewn looking texture. There's a couple of ways of going about it, needless to say. You know, hopefully that will help with kind of give you some ideas and stuff. But, you know, textures, you can play around with them and do lots of different things and on. So that's how you go about it. But you could draw shapes in there. You could do a lot of different things. All right, let's go and talk with Vern. When saving a file, what is the best path when saving a file? Well, let's use this as an example here. In the beginning, when you set up your job, the first thing you should do after you come into your job setup and all, and you set up your job and stuff, and you click OK, the first thing you should do is come over and save the project. And in your documents, you know, let's get to documents. In your documents, you're going to have your folders and stuff. You may have a folder that is called CNC Jobs, and if you've done any training with me, it's a folder that I recommend, you know, that y'all have, and it's basically like a filing cabinet. All of your job folders would be in there. And then we set up our job folder, and in this case I would call it, you know, a knife handle, and in there I would name my file. We'll call this you know, knife handle, and if it was a particular knife, Bowie knife handle, that, you know, Survivor knife handle, whatever you want to do, and you will save that. Now, by doing that, by saving right off the bat, anytime you are working in the software, whether you're going to search for a file, the first thing that the software is going to do, it's going to look in that job folder, you know, trying to keep us organized. So if I downloaded a particular pattern off of the web, you know, that I was going to use in this job, that pattern would, a picture or whatever would be in this folder, so I could point to it. But when I'm coming over now and I'm saving toolpaths and stuff, or saving my preview image, whenever I go to, and let's preview all the, let's do the checker one. Let's preview the visible toolpaths. and let's say that this was my, you know, handle and all, I kind of turn it into a, you know, whatever position that I could see what it looks like. And when I go to save the preview image, automatically, bam, it throws me right into my job folder, trying to keep me organized. And so this is my proof image. And no spaces. And then when I'm saving my toolpath, so for the texture profile and the texture, they use the same bit. Therefore, I can save them as one file. And so if I have it checked off to output them to one file, I can check off those two, and I can save those there. And this is going to be automatically, bam, it brings me right into my job folder, keeping me organized. That way I'm not hunting and searching. I can go in, and this is going to be the first file that I'm running. This is going to be whatever size piece of wood. I'm going to make up a size right now. Let's say that this was 10 by 5 by 0.75. And you would use whatever your job size is, but my job size was too big for this single handle type of thing. And this is my job is a knife handle. And then my bit was a 60 DEG V bit. So this naming system here allows me, it tells me that for this job, this is my first file that I'm running. I need a 10 by 5 by 3/4 inch board on the table and a 60-degree V bit in my router. So it tells me everything I need to know in that file name. And then I can you know, uncheck these guys, and the pocket for the drilling operation is my 1/8 inch end mill, so that's going to be number 2. I'm going to single click on this to throw this name in here. Helps me cheat so I don't have to retype, and that 1 becomes a 2, and the end information becomes a 0.125 end mill. Because the middle, the size of the board, and the name of the job doesn't change. So, so we'll hit save on that, uncheck that one, and save. And then I'll single click up there to throw the name down here, so I can just change that 2 to a 3, and I can get rid of that 1 to make it a 0.25 end mill and save that. So if I set up my job at the beginning, my job folder at the beginning, then everything that I save or open and all, it's going to look to that folder first, and it's going to keep me organized. And when I'm saving my file, my Vectric file, generally the file has about the same name as the folder, the job folder. But the toolpaths have their own unique identifying name that tells me what order that I run these toolpaths in. 1, 2, and 3. You know, which one do I run first, second, third. What size my material is, what the name of the job is, and then what bit is getting used. That is a recommended way of saving your files, and that is going to, in my opinion, is going to be the best path to take burn. Okay? Alright. Hopefully that answered your question. Alright, so Dave Garbett says, Laney, could you select both ways? Could you select both ways? Dave, I'm going to ask that you type in and kind of explain. Now, when you wrote that, I was doing the crosshatch pattern. I was, selecting those crosshatches about the same time that you typed that question. Could you elaborate just a little bit more to let me know what you're asking, what I could select both ways? And I'll come right back to you. All right, William, Z touch-off question from last week's acrylic session. If you now touch off to the bed of the digital wood carver or the spoil board, are you using the thickness of the material to be carved, then adding 0.01 to it? Good question. So when I am, and we're going to illustrate this out. Give me 2 seconds to draw my table, wasteboard, project material, router bit, and router. All right. And let's group that together. All right, this is going to represent my touch plate, so let's make it a little bit thinner. Let me zoom in there. Let me make that a little thinner. Okay, so when I have the job, in the job setup, when I have the job to set up on touching off on the material surface, that means that my material surface is 0. The top of my board is 0. So when I have my touch plate there, and I bring my bit down to the top of that touch plate, I am telling the software that I am sitting 0.01 above 0. Let's see here if I can do this. 0.01 apply. Okay, so my 0 is my board, top of my board. The top of my touch plate where that bit is sitting on it's sitting 10,000ths of an inch above the top of the board. Okay, so that's why we type in that 0.01. We're telling the software that we're sitting 10,000 inches above 0. Now, when I am using the bottom of the material, which was referenced in the software as the machine bed, meaning that I am either touching off on, let me close this, let me zoom in here. I am either touching off on my tabletop if I do not have a wasteboard on my table, or I'm touching off on a wasteboard if I do have a wasteboard on my table. It's whatever item is at the bottom of my material. And in this case, in this particular illustration, the wasteboard is the bottom. Now, when I choose to touch off here, the wasteboard becomes my 0. Okay, the wasteboard is my 0. So I'm going to, when I touch off and I bring my touch plate over, let me bring my touch plate over, and I bring that bit down to touch off of that, I am sitting again 10,000ths of an inch above 0, my wasteboard. So we type that in no matter if we're touching off on our table, our wasteboard, or the top of our material, because our table is either 0, our wasteboard is either 0, or the top of our board is 0, depending on what our board's sitting on. If I don't have a wasteboard on the table, then my tabletop is 0 if I'm working off of what's called the machine bed as the reference. Okay, so we're always referencing that. Now, how the software looks at this is if we go over to our job setup on the right side here, the first thing that the router does, and we're going to remove this, and we're going to let's put this touch plate away. We'll store that away for a minute. Now, if I tell the router to go to 0, now it's going to come and that's 0. My wasteboard is 0. Well, when you hit start, the router is going to go to its home start position. It's going to go to its home start position. And when I go to the home start position, it's going to, when I hit start, it's going to raise up and go to its home start position. That position is going to be X0, Y0, and then Z above the material, 0.8. But if I'm working off of a board that is, in this case, let's make it simple here, we'll type 0.375. If my actual project board or acrylic or whatever it is that I'm carving is 3/4 of an inch, it's raising up that 3/4 plus the 0.8. So it's going, no matter what, it's raising up to 0.8 above my material. Okay, so it's adding in the 3/4 and then it's going in 0.8 above that. So it's raising to that 0.8 above material. Now, when that router bit is traveling around, moving from one place to another before it starts cutting and things, it's traveling at 0.2 and 0.2. you know, its clearance, that safe clearance, and that is above material. So it automatically adds in that thickness of the material plus 0.2, you know, and stuff. It's above the material, because if we look, if I click OK on this, and if I look up here, if you look very closely, it might be blurred out, but you might be able to see it where it says in light gray letters, home position, X0, Y0, Z, 1.55. And that's the 0.75 plus the 0.8. Okay? 0.75 plus 0.8 is 1.55. So it automatically accounts in that. So when it's traveling in that gap above material, Z gap above material, it's traveling above that 0.2, above the material top. And its home start position, when it raises up to the 0.8, it's raising up to 0.8 above the material. It takes in account the thickness, no matter if your 0 is the wasteboard, the tabletop, or the top of the material. So hopefully, William, that answered your question. Okay. All right. Let's close. Let's hit cancel on this. All right, Jerry says, can you explain the icons on the left side of Planet CNC, the third icon from the bottom in particular? My spindle will go down and touch off, but how do I set this for my Z0? All right. So, as I said, I don't have TNG on this computer at the moment, but if you will indulge me for a few minutes, a quick few minutes. Here, let's do this. Alright, so if I hold down my control alternate key, I can drag 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops. You come down here. 5. Go to 0, go to XY, XY, G28, G30. Alright, and then let's pull down X, Y, Z, and A. Okay, so in the TNG software, what Jerry is referring to is you've got your number boxes here, X, Y, Z, and A. And you should always, in your TNG, by the way, you have 4 tabs up here. The work tab, machine tab, motors, and G code. You should always be working in the machine tab. It will always update your work, your machine, and your G code. You should always just be in your machine tab when you're zeroing out your machine and stuff. So always, for those of you that haven't been doing that, just only work in your machine tab, not your work, and don't jump back and forth between machine and work. Always work in your machine tab, because if you jump back and forth, then you create what's known as an offset in your software that you don't want. All right, so indulge me for a minute as a visual for those of you that aren't looking at your TNG at the moment. Right at the very top left corner, you have your emergency stop. It's a circle with a red circle with an X in it. Right after that, you have a circle that has a dot in the middle. That is your go to 0 button. And following that, you have a circle with an XY in it. That is go to 0XY. You have 2 buttons underneath that you don't use. Go to G28 and go to G30. So the third and fourth button underneath the emergency stop, 1, 2, 3, 4, that G28, G30 you wouldn't use. So, you know, we can kind of exclude those. Underneath that, you have your set offset for your X and Y, set offset for your Z. Now, these 2 buttons you don't use on a regular basis, but if you were working with digital probe and things, then you would use those two buttons for setting up your offsets for your X and Y and measuring your Z offset and stuff. So these two buttons here, which would have a, I think it's a box with an XY in it with an arrow pointing up and an arrow pointing to the right. That's your XY, and then the same thing, a box with a Z. And with an arrow and an arrow, that's your Z offset. Now right below that you have a box that has a ruler with two lines. Oops. Two lines. Space bar, not escape. And then it has a line in here with, you know, kind of like an arrow, pointing down and an arrow pointing up. Terrible illustration, but you'll get the idea in a second. Okay, now this is your automatic Z touch off button here. When you touch off with your automatic Z, the Z will come down from wherever the bit is at, wherever the bit happens to be sitting at that particular moment. When you push this button, the Z will come down. It will touch off. It will register the 0.010 of an inch touch plate. It will go back up and it'll park itself right back where it was before it started that downward motion. So it automatically touches off the Z and takes in that 0.010 of an inch effect. As long as your settings are correct. So in your settings, file settings, in that settings box, when it opens up, there's a menu on the left hand side, and right down towards the bottom you have a box that says measure. You're an option, not a box. You have an option that says measure in our settings, and if we come and click on measure, right at the very bottom there's going to be an entry box for your sensor size, and that should be set to 0.01, the thickness of your touch plate. If it's not, then you're not going to get an accurate reading when you're doing an automatic touch off of your Z. Okay, so you got to make sure in your file settings, go in when the settings box opens up in that menu, go all the way down to measure, click on measure, and then over in the measure box in the main window at the very bottom, your Z size, or your sensor size should I say, you need to type in 0.01. Tell it what size your sensor is, and then click save and export and save those settings if you had to make a change. Now if you have the XY quick set tool, DWC quick set, and you use both your flat touch plate and your DWC quick set, when you're using your flat touch plate you're going to set this to 0.01. When you're using your quick set tool, you're going to set it to 0.5. So you're going to be going and changing that measure setting. If you're going to be using your automatic touch off, you're going to be changing that setting for if you're using your quick set or if you're using your normal touch plate. That number is going to alter between 0.01 or 0.5 in the settings. Now, below that, there are two remaining buttons. This button here looks very similar to this button. It has a ruler, but right next to it, it has a router bit. Now this button is a no-no button. This button is it's a tool measuring button. It compensates and measures the tool offset for an automatic tool changer. You don't have the sensor for an automatic tool changer, and you don't have an automatic tool changer. So if you were to think that you were doing an automatic touch off and you went to push this button, but you accidentally pushed this button, what's going to happen is that router's going to come down. It's going to make contact with the sensor. It's not going to recognize the sensor, so it's going to keep pushing through. And it's going to keep pushing through and pushing through and pushing through until it pierces through and starts piercing into the wood, and it will not stop until you hit the emergency stop or turn the power off, because you don't have the sensor for an automatic tool changer. So if you are using your automatic touch off, which I'm not a big fan of, I like manually setting my Z, you have more control. But if you are using your automatic touch off, be very aware when you're stretching over and holding your touch plate nice and flat, and you got your mouse and you're stretched to your limits to get to your computer, and you're going to push this button, make sure that you don't accidentally hit that button. You know, you want to hit the button that has the ruler with the 2 lines and the 2 arrows. That's your touch off. This is a tool measure button, Z tool measure. For an automatic tool changer, you don't have one. And then the last button looks like a house. That's a homing procedure for units with fixed home positions. Your CNC has a variable home position, so that button, the home button, doesn't get used. So hopefully, Jerry, that explains to you how to automatically touch off your Z and how to check your settings, your measure option in your settings to make sure that your sensor is set up properly with a sensor thickness of 0.01. All right. Cool beans. All right, so sorry you had to really use your imagination in this as far as because I don't have TNG. Hopefully I did a decent enough job in explaining it. Okay. All right, so we're going to jump down buffering. .01. No matter if you're touching off on the top of your board, if you're touching off on the spoil board, or if you're touching off on the machine, the tabletop itself, your touch plate thickness does not change. It's .01. Because when you have the job set up as the top of the material, machine surface, the top of your board is 0. Meaning my touch plate is 0.010 of an inch above 0. If I'm working with the machine bed as my Z0 position, which is a representation of the bottom of my material, that means that my machine bed or my wasteboard is 0. The top of my wasteboard or the top of my machine bed is 0. Now, if I don't have a wasteboard, my machine bed is what I touch off to. If I have a wasteboard, my wasteboard is what I touch off to. If you have a wasteboard, you would not zero off on your CNC table. If I have a wasteboard, I would not come over here and touch off on my tabletop. You would touch off on your wasteboard because the wasteboard is at the bottom of your project material. And that top of that wasteboard becomes 0. But when I come in here and I'm touching off on 0, you know, with my little touch plate, I am sitting 0.010 of an inch. Oops, let me get in here and zoom in there. I'm sitting 0.010 of an inch above 0. So no matter if I'm touching off, I always type in .01 in the Z box. All right? All right. Awesome blossom. All right, so Dave Garbett has a good question, and this is kind of, this is a matter of preference, but for me, I have, I feel strongly about this one. Dave says, I use the automatic touch off. Could you go into manual? And I'm a big advocate of manually touching off the Z. One, you have a lot more control. If you, depending on where your computer is positioned, and you got your touch plate and it's just you in the shop and you're trying to hold that touch plate as nice and flat as you can right underneath that bit, and you got the other hand over on the mouse or your finger pad, for God's sake, if you have a finger pad, trying to automatically touch off. And if you touch off and if that touch plate isn't nice and flat, maybe it's got a little curl to it, a little curve, little I flinch or something, when the bit comes down, as it starts coming down, whatever, there's a possibility that I could not get an accurate touch off. And I don't like that. I like to be able to take and Dave, the manual method is basically you're going to, wherever you're touching on, we'll touch off on the top of the material for this demonstration. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to hold my touch plate nice and flat on the top of my wasteboard underneath my bit, and I'm going to use my control pendant. and I'm going to lower my Z down until it stops automatically. It will stop automatically when it makes contact with the touch plate. While it is sitting on the touch plate, a lot of people pull the touch plate out or this or that. While it's touching off on the touch plate, you're going to come over to your computer and you're going to come into your Z-box. And in your Z-box, you're going to erase whatever numbers are in there at the time. And you're going to erase all those numbers out, and you're going to type in 0.01 in your Z-box, and you're going to hit the enter key, and it's going to read 0.01000, and you have just manually set your Z. When you've done that, after you've done that, then you come back over and raise your router bit up and put your touch plate away. Okay? And that is manually setting your Z. Okay? So you bring the bit down, make contact with the touch plate, nice good contact. You come over to your Z-box in your controller software, erase the numbers that are in there. If you're in TNG, just double click and it'll open up an entry box. Type in the 0.01, hit enter, and it locks that number in. Raise your bit up off the touch plate and put your touch plate away. All right. Okay, so Ronnie Probert asks, if you use 3/4 inch MDF for a spoil board, how deep would you drill your hole to screw the board to the machine table? Ronnie, if I'm reading that question correctly, you're asking me how deep I would drill a hole to screw my wasteboard to my machine table? And the answer would be not. You do not screw into your tabletop. You use your T-tracks, or if you have the white table, you use your T-slots. You know, those slots are your T-tracks to secure your wasteboard to your tabletop. Don't drill holes in your tabletop to secure your wasteboard. Absolutely don't ever do that. All that's doing is just tearing up your tabletop. That's what the spoil board is there to protect your tabletop, not to screw holes all over the place. So I hope I'm reading that question wrong. Now, if your question is how deep do I if I'm screwing my project board to my wasteboard, how big my screws are? Well, if my project board is 3/4 of an inch, I want to be countersunk a little bit. So I'm most likely using about an inch long screw. I'm going to be countersunk. I'll be going about ½ inch into my project board, or through my project board, because I'm going to be countersunk a little, about a 1/4 inch down, and then I'm going to be about a ½ inch into my wasteboard. But if you are asking how deep to screw into your tabletop, no, you do not screw into your tabletop. You use your T-slots. T-bolts, T-nuts, your T-slots, if it's a new black table, T-slots can handle 1/4-20 hex head bolts. If I have a 3/4 inch wasteboard and I'm countersinking a bolt into that wasteboard and a machine screw, not a bolt, my machine screws are 1 inch long. They're going down through my wasteboard and then into that nut in the T-slot and securing it down. So they're about 1 inch long, and they're sitting recessed below the surface of the wasteboard. So my bit, when I surface plane the wasteboard, it doesn't get hit or anything. It's countersunk below it. But you would never screw into your tabletop. That would just ruin your tabletop. So hopefully you haven't done that. If you have, it's if that was your intention to do so, that's that's kind of what you want to do, but that's you normally wouldn't. So let me know if I misunderstood the question or if any part of that answer helped out. All right, so this is good. We're getting somewhere. All right, let's see how. Any more questions? Any more questions? I'm going to take a sip of Dr. Pepper, my thinking juice. Dr. Pepper. Refreshing. Oh my goodness. Okay, Ronnie, man, don't screw into your tabletop if you were planning on doing so. Use your T-slots. You can actually draw, like let's say for instance that this project board here was my my waste board and stuff. I can measure the distance from where this is going to sit on my table, where my holes would be. Imagine I have 2 holes on this end, and let's make them the right size. They'd be 1/4 of an inch. And then I have 2 holes on the other end, and what we'll do is we'll just grab those 2 and hold down my control alternate key. Alternate helps me keep on the same axis. So I'd have holes in the end. If you want some in the middle, that's fine too, but usually I use the 2 inside T-tracks if I have the black table. Now with this, there's going to be the first thing I do is I use my 90-degree V-bit, or vice versa. You can however you want to do. Let's use our end mill first. Now the first thing I do is I would set up a tool path for my 1/4 inch end mill, and for those 4 holes. Let's turn that one off. Alright. Okay. So for my 4 holes, and now I'm only going to drill, because it's only a 3/4 inch waste board, I'm going to drill, about 3/8 inch down. And it's a drilling operation, not a pocket. Sorry about that. Drilling operation, about 1/4 of an inch down, 3/8, whatever you want to be. Don't go 3/4. Don't go 3/4. You want to go 3/8 or what have you. I'm going to use pecking, so it kind of pulls that material up and everything, and that's going to be my my waste board holes. Okay, now it's only going 3/8 because I'm going to use a hand drill, and I'm going to finish drilling out all the way through on the back side, because of course the table's sitting on top of my on my table right now, and I'm going to have clamps on it holding it still while I drill, and then when it's done I'm going to go ahead and put my screws in. Now I don't have to use my clamps anymore. But the second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do another drilling operation with going about 3/8 of an inch, but this time I'm going to use my 90-degree V-bit. Now I prefer my 90-degree V-bit, my Amana 90-degree V-bit, because it has a 3/8 inch head. The one with the 1/2 inch head is fine as well too, but the 3/8 inch head is the perfect size for the actual head of the machine screw. So I prefer using that 90-degree V-bit from Amana, and I'm going to calculate that tool path, and what that's going to do is that's going to create my, let's see if I can pull down and zoom into one of these holes. That's going to create my countersink. It's going to create my recess so that the head of my screw is below the surface, but it's also going to create that nice countersink for that screw to sit nice and well in there and things. And so if I were to draw this out, I'll have a machine screw. Let's see how good I can do this. Hold down my shift key, pull that out just a little bit. Alright, on my machine screw, I'm going to go into node editing, and somewhere right about here I'm going to insert a point, and somewhere right about here I'm going to insert a point, and I'm going to take and pull this out a little bit. Pull this out a little bit. Alright, and so it's not the prettiest machine screw in the world, but it will work. Alright, so my machine screw is going to go down, and it's going to be recessed. And of course, let me make my hole a little bit bigger. The countersink part, you'll see this in a minute when I draw it out. And let me center things up. There we go. All right, now I'm going to offset this one outward. 0.01. Alrighty. And now I'm going to use my scissors tool, and I'm going to trim that, and that way. Oh, let's see, did I? All right. So in my go away. And bear with me. This will go into there, and then I'll have my, T-track, and inside that T-track I'll have my hex nut. So my countersink from the top of my wasteboard. My screw head is countersunk a good almost 3/8 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch. That way I have all that material that I can, once I screw this down and secure it to my wasteboard in my T-track, and by the way, it would go all the way to the bottom of the T-track. I'm gonna run a surface plane, and I'm gonna surface off that top of that MDF, make it nice and flat and all, but I've got to secure it down first. So my pocket, my 1/4 inch drill hole will drill my hole through the wasteboard, and then my 3/8 inch V-bit will create that countersink for the screw of my head and everything, and then it comes in and screws into a nut that's inside of that T-track and everything. 1-inch machine screws is what I find is that I end up using with my my countersinks for my 3/4 inch wasteboards. All right, let's see here. Okay, on Planet CNC, Jerry asks, and then Dave will come down to yours. Tell me again why I use the machine tab and not the work tab. Okay, so the machine tab is the machine's absolute position. So if you recall, let's say that on our screen, you'll know that there's kind of like an orange box, and there's you'll see a you'll see a red line that comes here like this, and then you'll see another little arrow, and then a circle. Bear with me a second. Gotta illustrate. Where's my line? Ooh. Control Z. We want to keep Control Z. We want to keep that one. Alright, do my best to try to, ooh, what was that? Control Z. Alright, so in our program we have this orange kind of box, and then and on the inside of the orange box there's a red line, And then right on that corner of that red line, there's an X and a Y, kind of, and then the round yellow dot when you zero out, that's your router, you know, X, Y, and Z. Okay, so we're kind of looking in the top view like if you were looking in your top view window. Now, if my machine tab, my absolute position and all, is setting the machine position. My work position is automatically updated by that. But if I come in here, if I set my machine position to, let's say, 1 inch for kicks and giggles, this thing is going to jump off of where it should be on that corner. And when I set my work tab, it's in, let's say I set my work tab to 0, you know, or what have you. And then my router is going to jump off over to here. And so now I've just created an offset. My machine's absolute position, if I'm, you know, setting, whether it's the center of my board or the bottom left corner, when I set that machine's absolute position, it places that machine's absolute position and work position exactly where it should be. It updates it automatically, the work tab, for us. If I go in and change the work tab after I've set the machine tab, then it's throwing everything off and creating an offset. So we don't want to get confused and work in both the tabs. You work in the machine tab only, because you are physically setting the machine's absolute position. When you move that machine and jog it around and you zero out your X and your Y and you touch off your Z, you are setting the machine's absolute position. And that's why you work in the machine tab. Okay? If you had a fixed home position and your machine's absolute position was here, and your work position, because you have a fixed home position and your board's starting position, you know, is over here. Let's say my board's over here and my starting position is, you know, on this bottom left corner. Then I have to set my machine's absolute position and then my work position, and I have to create that offset. But you don't have a fixed home position on your CNC. You have a variable home position. So when you set your machine tab, it's bringing your work to that absolute position, like if you were starting off the bottom left corner and things. So you don't work in the work tab. You work in the machine tab only, because you are setting the machine's position. Okay? Hopefully that will help. Alright. Loud sound. Me yelling? Was that me yelling? Is that what the loud sound was? Or was it the beep from my text message going off? Alright. Let's see here. Let's go down to Dave. Laney, do you by chance have a file for the 2440 for the wasteboard? No. I have a design that I created for the wasteboard wedge jig combination that I posted pictures of the measurements and stuff for that little 23 by 24 inch board. Of course, it could be altered and made bigger if somebody wanted to. Those pictures are in there. I could set up a Vectric file for that particular jig. But it could vary depending on if somebody doesn't want their board to be 23 inches wide by 24 inches long. They might want theirs to be like I made when I actually went over to a customer's house, Dale's place, a couple weeks back, and I actually made him the wedge jig. We worked together and we made it, and he wanted his to be longer. I think we ended up going 38 inches with his, so the measurements changed and stuff. But for the most part, I mean, I could make a VCarve file for the 23 by 24 inch jig in toolpaths and stuff. But a couple of the toolpaths you're actually manually doing, I could work it out to where it would be all through the Vectric software if you want. But no, your wasteboards, It all depends on how you're going to set. I highly recommend wasteboards to be 23 inches by 39 because you have a 24 by 40. And I think, you know, people that cover their entire table with a board, their whole 30-inch by 48-inch table, we got to mill that down. Well, we can't mill all those edges, so we end up with lips and stuff on the corners, and like a wall. Basically, we're ending up with this big old pocket and all. I highly recommend a 23-inch by 39-inch wasteboard, so that when I do a surface plane, I'm taken out from corner to corner. My router bit, my 1.25-inch router bit is able to travel over the edges and clear out, give me a nice flat board as it mills back and forth and things. So I recommend a 23 by 39 inch. That gives me a 1/2 inch on each edge, the back, the front, and the two sides. It gives me about a 1/2 inch travel all the way around past my wasteboard, which means my bit can overlap by a 1/4 inch or so, and I can get all my entire wasteboard nice and flat. If I make my wasteboard as big as my table, then now my router bit can only go so far, and I'm going to end up with a lip around the edge and stuff where it can't mill. So I'm kind of working in a pocket, which I don't like. I want my board to be flat all the way around so I can reference. That way, if I want to screw a ruler on it, if I want to screw a fence on it, if I want to do whatever to it, I can. I don't have to worry about I got to be down in the pocket to work with it, kind of thing. So do you guys still have sound? William lost sound. I thought you said loud sound, William. I didn't see lost sound. Yeah, Ronnie, no problem. Hopefully that helps explain some things. David, have not used models to this point, but you always suggest if I quit stuttering, but you always suggest we regenerate items we get from you or anyone else. Is there a way to test a model if you do not have the Aspire to regenerate the model? What I mean by that, Dave, when I say regenerate, I'm talking about recalculate your toolpaths and things. Never take for granted a toolpath, whether the file comes from me or from Vetric or anyone, because my toolpaths, when I set them up, they're set up for my VBit, my bit speed and feed and things, and they should pretty much be the same, but a lot of people have their own custom settings for their bits. Your 60-degree VBit and my 60-degree VBit could be vastly different on depth of cut or feed rate, and I have the hiccups, sorry, plunge rate or something like that. So I always highly recommend recalculating the toolpaths, because a lot of times, especially from Vetric, those guys, they might be running millimeters a second or inches per second versus inches per minute, and you go in there and you start running, and that all of a sudden you're cranking out. And that happened with Sam, young lady, the other day. She's like, man, that thing seems so fast, that it was running so fast, and because in the toolpath, and let me get to so I don't change my VBit. The toolpath was running, was set at 55 and 20 in the toolpath, but it was actually set to inches per second, 55 inches per second and 20 inches per second. And so when you bring that toolpath into the your TNG or your CNC USB controller and you're running it, it's running it based on an inches per minute calculation. So if I came in, if I change this 55 inches per second to per minute, I'm actually traveling at a feed rate of 3,300 inches a minute and a plunge rate of 1,200 inches a minute, which far exceeds the machine, right?
And it was just a matter of the inches per minute was set to inches per second in the toolpath. The numbers looked right, but this was wrong. And you know, when we changed it back to inches per minute, that's the speed it was actually traveling at. And if she would have looked at the G code and understood and knew, you know, she's new, and if she would have looked at the G code and seen the F reading in the G code and TNG, it said F1200 and F3300, and you know, feeding it that fast, you know, inches per minute and stuff. So it was. You know, she was like, holy cow, this thing seems like it's running really fast. And when I got on TeamViewer with her, we discovered that it was set for inches per second and all. And so little things like that, that's why I say never take for granted. Always, you know, recalculate a toolpath. Open it up, look at the settings and everything, check out the tool. You can click on edit and look at the tool. I prefer that you click on select and actually select your 60-degree V-bit out of your tool database, and then just click calculate, recalculate that toolpath. You know, and just go through and recalculate them, and then save those toolpaths and run those. That's what I mean by, you know, always the word regenerates, not the, you know, exact answer. Recalculate is the term. But now when it comes to models, and hopefully I don't get buffering on this. If I do, guys, forgive me, because I found out that I only have an i5 on this, but when I'm working with models and all, my CPU usage spikes from about 39% use to about, or from 0 actually to like 6% use to like 30 to 40% use when I'm working with a model in the 3D view, and so it kind of buffers a little bit. But hopefully my settings and things have been going well tonight with minimal buffering. Now, when I have a model in here, when I import an STL file or something, a lot of times when you import an STL, that model's huge. It's like, you know, it's hundreds of inches big and things. And we want to size them down. And while I'm talking about that, I might as well do that just to show you how to bring in an STL model, because that might be a question that would come up. So I'm going to go into my modeling tools, and I'm going to import a 3D component. I'm going to import a 3D component. And so if I come over here and I go to my downloads, and I grab my eagle and flag model. Okay, now that one's not a good one. Hold on a second, that's a small one. Let me go into import a model. Where's one of my big models at? Big model. That one's only 13. Bear with me a second. Okay, this will work. All right. So when that model comes in, you know, it's oversized, usually by hundreds of inches. You know, it might be like 200 inches by 100 inches or what have you. The first thing I have to do is orientate this model. Now, this model is top orientated. I can see the top of the board. That's what I want. But sometimes, depending on who created it and what plane they created in, sometimes models can come in sideways, upside down like this. They can come in, you know, off on their, you know, their side, or they can come in backwards, or they can come in, you know, upside down where you're actually looking at the bottom versus the top. So you want to orientate the model properly. And in this case, I want to orientate to the top. Okay. And now my rotation, if let's say that I, you know, needed to rotate it 90 degrees because my board is clamped along the Y instead of the X, well, I can rotate, you know, negative 90 degrees or positive 90 degrees, you know, or 0. You know, I can rotate it if I need to. That's the rotation about the Z-axis. Now, if I'm working with a two-sided project and it requires some actual manipulation, and let's go into the y-axis here, and it'll be hard to see, but there's a black line running right here along the bottom of my model. That's my zero plane. Well, sometimes I might need to orientate or adjust my model manually. I may need to be able to rotate it and pivot it and things, like literally physically come in here and adjust it. And depending on which axis I'm wanting to rotate on or whatever, I can do that and stuff. So there may be I may have to do some interactive rotating, but for the most part, you really only have to. Oops, wrong one. Dadgummit. You really only have to do your orientation. From there, I want to size this down. Now, this board, project board, is like a 10 by 10 or something like that. So I need to size this down to fit. So I would come in here, and my X, Y, and Z are all linked together, so I can change one or the other. I'd come in here and let's make this 12 inches. Click apply and size it down. And then I need to center it on my board. So now it's centered within that red grid, And not only is it centered, but it actually centered it in the material as well. And so I need this model to be above the zero plane, that black line that you see running across the middle. And so I need to slide this slide bar all the way to the bottom to bring that model up above the zero plane. And you'll see the difference. You see this kind of like bluish area here. When it's below the zero plane, it turns into this darkish grayish blue and all. When it's below the zero plane, I need the model to be above the zero plane. So I'm going to slide that slide bar back, and then I'm going to discard and delete anything that may fall below that zero plane, and I'm going to click OK. And it's the same principle and steps for every single model and stuff when you're bringing in an STL file and all. So that's how you would orientate and bring in a model and size it and stuff. When somebody creates an STL model for you or whatever, you got to orientate it, you've got to size it, and you've got to center it and place it in your material and all. And then of course from here you create your tool paths and everything. But when someone gives you a fully ready to go file with tool paths and everything, don't just save the tool paths and run them. Open them up, select the same bit from your tool database, and if you don't have the bit that they used, then you got to use an alternative, and recalculate that tool path and then save it. That's what I mean by that. Okay, that's what I mean by that. So hopefully, David, that answered your question. Now, Dave says he drills his wasteboards. He imports or drills his wasteboards manually. Absolutely, Dave. I do my drilling. I'll clamp my wasteboard kind of in the position. I'll use my wedge clamps or something, to get it in position, my wasteboard, and then I run my drill holes and then my countersink holes, and then I finish drilling through the wasteboard, because I only drill like halfway through, but I finish drilling through hand drilling, making sure to put something on the bottom side so there's no blowout and everything, because I don't want any blowout raising my wasteboard up, but I finish drilling the holes through, and then I put my screws in and screw down my wasteboard, and then I run my surfacing tool path, to surface off the entire wasteboard, So good questions so far. So hopefully you're enjoying the answers. Kind of go from there. All right. So RC asks, Laney, would you know what would cause the Z height to change during the middle of a carve? Usually at random points during a carve, it raises up sometimes 0.2 to 0.7. It seems to be carving in the air. Yes. So there are three main causes for loss of Z height. One, your flex coupler, which is the spiral coupler underneath the motor. And let me see if I can draw this out, because a lot of people say not the flex capacitor, but the flex coupler. Let me turn this model off here. turn this up. Let's see if I can illustrate this a little bit. All right, at the top of our CNC, we have a motor, and there's a little post sticking out the top of it, and then there's a shaft in the bottom of it, and then we have our threaded rod, which controls the raising of the Z, and the coupler that connects those two together. It usually has some, looks like a big old spring. There's some spiral lines in it, you know, in the middle and all. Well, if the set screws on that flex coupler are loose, the shaft could be spinning and slipping inside the flex coupler, and as it, you know, when it goes down, it might catch and go down, or when it goes up, it might catch and go up. But there's going to be that time where it slips a little bit, even a fraction, and that right then and there, your Z is thrown off. And then when it catches, now it's, you know, when it's raising that router up, well, it thinks that you know, it only went up 1/8 of an inch, but it might have only went up 1/16 because it slipped. And now my Z is thrown off. So now everything is kind of riding in different positions. So the flex coupler could be slipping not only on the shaft side, but also on the lower side. The flex coupler itself could be broke because this is a big old spring. Now, I had a couple of people the last 2 times, a couple of customers, 3 recently. The flex coupler acts like a big spring. If there's tension or stress on the router, that tension or stress is captured in the flex coupler, and it snaps and breaks before it damages the motor. It breaks. And a lot of people don't really notice that, you know, it's broken all. Keep an eye on your flex coupler. If it looks crooked, if it looks twisted or tilted and all, it could be broken. You know, so that the flex coupler could be a reason for bits. Z-height variances. The other thing is in the actual router, the bit itself could be unwinding and slowly slipping out, or it could be loose. So when the board actually, when everything goes down, you know, when it goes down into the, you know, and plunging into your wood and everything, it could actually be pushing your router up into the collet a little bit. So that way, you know, when it, you know, comes up, or thinks that it's a certain depth, when it comes up, now that router's up a little higher in there, and you know, now it's, you know, not where it's supposed to be. You know, it actually pushed the router up, you know, so now 0 is no longer 0. You know, the router could actually be, you know, slipping out and unwinding itself, you know, causing it to drop. Your communication, let's say that from the computer to the CNC, you have your USB cable connection that connects to the two. And if that voltage, the voltage from the computer, the voltage, hold on, there we go. The USB port is sending out a 5-volt signal to the USB board, and it is what powers the board, not the outlet, not the cable going to the wall outlet, that's plugged into the wall, but the actual USB cable is powering the control board in there. And if that voltage, that 5-volt signal, if it drops because your battery's going low, or power flickers, or what have you, or maybe the USB port is getting weaker, or the USB cable itself is getting weaker, whatever, if that voltage drops, then communication is lost and the board is powered down because it doesn't have the 5-volt signal. And it may only be a millisecond. and then it regains power and everything, and by that time your computer is still running. Your G code is still running, because there's no signal coming back to the computer telling the computer that the machine has stopped for that brief moment. And now, but that G code is still running, so now it's on a different line. The Z's at a different position, but the router is has stopped in a certain place, and all of a sudden it throws off my Z is now off, whether I'm off in the positive direction or off in the negative direction. It could be that. So a lot of times people get a USB hub, a 4-port USB hub that has an actual power outlet that runs to the wall and provides a constant 5-volt signal. It's a power outlet that provides a constant 5-volt signal, so that way it's not dependent on the USB port on the computer to handle that whole load. So those are recommended. A lot of times people are using USB cables that are really long. Should be under 6 foot. Preferably the USB cables that that we provided with it, or one that you purchased that was similar, dual shielded and all. But if you go over long extended lengths with a USB cable, voltage drop, causing that millisecond of connection loss and things. But now also recently I had someone losing Z in the positive and negative. Sometimes it's 0.2, sometimes it's 0.7, sometimes it's deeper, sometimes it's lower, and it was kind of all over the map. And one project was running fine, that they were running, and the other project, every time they run it, it was always the Z would be varying, and it's like, but it's a project that I've run before. It's a VCarve, just like the file before it, but what have you. Well, come to find out that rather than using the in this case they were using the G code inch tap instead of the digital wood carver. So let's go and let's find that G code inch tap. They were using the G code inch tap post processor. Well, their post processor had gotten changed to G code ATC inch tap. They didn't realize that it got changed. And see, if I put my mouse right over this and I roll my wheel on my mouse, it's like a roulette wheel. It's like a slot machine. I can just roll through those codes. So if I'm going through and changing something, I could inadvertently, my finger could be on there, and I could inadvertently change that without even realizing it and stuff. And that had happened. Their G code inch tap was changed to the G code ATC inch tap inadvertently. Well, that automatic tool changer puts in an H code in the toolpath, and one of the things you can do is line 3 on your G code, line 3, G0Z 0.800, and if you look past that, and if it says H anything, H1, H2, whatever, H, that means it has a compensation. It is a tool length compensation code for that automatic tool changer. Remember me talking to you about that measure button that measures tool length? And it compensates in the positive and the negative for tool length and everything. And therefore, but there's no tool length for it to compensate from. So it was just randomly compensating the Z. So it was getting, it was compensating more and less. So it was getting higher and lower in various random positions and things throughout the process and stuff, and it was throwing them off. So I always say, number one, check your post processor. Make sure you're using the correct post processor. If you're in 8 or 8.5 of the Vectric software, make sure that you're using that G code inch tap. If you are in version 9 or higher, use the digital wood carver inch tap post processor. Make sure you don't accidentally hit millimeter, make sure you don't hit millimeter and not realize it, or laser, or what have you. Make sure you're in the digital wood carver inch tap, so always keep an eye on that. One quick thing I always do is when I open a file, I look at my G code, and I always look at line number 3 and make sure I don't ever see that H1. It's an automatic giveaway that the post processor is incorrect. I also look at my 0.8, knowing that I have my home start position set at 0.8. If it says 0.20 or something like that, or 20, not 0.20, but it says 20, that means I'm in millimeters and not inches. Because 20 millimeters is 0.8. So. It's an automatic giveaway. So it's the first thing that my eyes always train on the G code when I open it up is I look at line number 3 because it tells a lot in that G code. So incorrect post-processor voltage drop from the USB power cable, slipping of the bit in the collet, or slipping of the flex coupler or damaged flex coupler. All of these are possible culprits for Z position loss. Number one culprit is someone raising their Z-axis up right from the get-go. They touch off their Z and they raise their Z up really high to move their touch plate out of the way, not realizing that they hit the limit. Boom, 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 boom. You only got a 5-inch Z height. And they raise it up real high, and automatically Z's lost, gone. It's a dead giveaway when you hear So, and then all of a sudden they hit the start button, and that bad boy, that bit comes plunging down, and it starts carving at depths known to unknown to man and everything, and that is a lot of times improper raising of the Z. And also knowing what your materials are. So from your tabletop to the bottom of the router, you have a 5-inch safe height of travel, unless you have the extensions, the Z blocks, riser blocks in or something. But you have a 5-inch on the 2440. You have a 4-inch on the mini carver. So what that means is, from my tabletop to the bottom of my router, I have a safe clearance of 4 inches. Well, on my table, I have a 3/4 inch wasteboard. That comes off. I got another 3/4 inch board. Right there, there's 1.5 inches from that 4 inches or 5 inches, depending on which machine I'm on. So now from that 5 inches, I've, 1.5 inches off. Now I've only got, 3.5 inches left of material, height. My router bit is sticking out about 1.25 inches, so now I'm at 2.25 inches, right? 1.5 inches. Let's see here, 3.5 minus 1.25 inches is 2.25, I believe. So I only have that much Z height left, and my Z is raising up on that home start position above my material, 0.8 of an inch. So that's got to come out of there too. So all of those numbers added together, my wasteboard, my project board, how much bit that I have extruding out of the router, plus my Z height, all of those have to equal less than 5 inches if I'm on the 2440, or less than 4 inches if I'm on the 1824. Otherwise, when I hit the start button right from the get-go, that router is going to raise up, hit the limit, lose its position, and I'm screwed from the start. And it's going to start plunging into depths unknown. Okay, so that's a culprit as well. So there's 5 different possibilities of loss of Z. You can troubleshoot by checking out and testing each and every one of them. Also, the connector pins on your cables, that you could be losing directional pins. They could be getting shorted out and need to be replaced. That's another option as well. So there's a lot of things to check out for. All right, so let's see here. And yeah, RC, if you're getting a 0.2, which is 1/4 inch, and a 0.7, which is 3/4 inch, you're either hitting your Z limit, or your bit is seriously slipping in or out of the collet. Your coupler, definitely check the flex coupler, whether it's broke or loose. And you definitely check all of those, because there's something that one of those 5 things is wrong with your machine and needs to be repaired or corrected. Or you could be just raising it up too high when you touch off and losing Z right off the bat, because that's a big jump from 0.2 to 0.7. But So definitely, I would highly recommend that you nip that in the butt and you troubleshoot that and figure out which one is the culprit and get it repaired as soon as possible. Okay, yeah, William. A lot of times people, they don't realize that, they touch off their Z. You only need to raise that router and everything ever so slightly when you're touching off. You only need to raise it up just a little bit to move the touch plate out of the way. Because when you hit start, the router's going to raise up to its home start position before it starts, carving and things. If you sit there and you hold down your controller button to raise your Z up off of your touch plate and you hit that limit, you got the fan, you got music going in the shop, you got, whatever, air conditioner running, and you don't hear that where it hit the limit. You have no idea that you've raised it up too high. You hit the start button thinking, okay, everything is all happy-go-lucky, and all of a sudden that bit buries down and you're just plowing in, And there are some people in this group, most likely, that can speak from experience to have having done that and having cut a nice big groove in their table or ruined a nice piece of material and all because they raised their Z up and hit their limit. Or they didn't realize that their Z gap above material was set too high because they were carving in thick material, and as your material gets thicker, this number should be going down, in that home start position, because you don't have that much room to raise up, when it starts. Because when you hit the start button, the first thing that's going to happen, the router's going to raise up to a certain point and then turn on. And if you don't have that room for it to raise up to, it's going to automatically hit the limits and lose its Z. All right? Now, with that, if before I get into Dave Guinness, bear with me, I'll get to your question. Before I get into that, I want to talk to you about something. In the TNG software, and most likely even in CNC USB controller. I haven't tested it in CNC USB controller, but a customer, and you might be in the group, give me a shout out if you are, but a customer pointed out to me about my range and motion setting in TNG. We can set a soft limit, but because we have a variable home position, that soft limit changes with each job. So if we were going to change or set it up, we would have to set it at each job. Now, if I have a jig on my table where I always reference off the same bottom left corner of that jig, like my wedge jig, which I've been using primarily, I can set my soft limits, and when my router gets to that point, it will stop. It won't hit its limits. But I have to set my, my Z limits will change depending on the thickness of my material. My Z soft limit will change. My X and Y soft limit will change depending on where I'm clamping my board and things. But like I said, if I have a jig, then I can pretty much just keep, work off of one setting. But I will do a little video for the Facebook group of soft limits. But in my soft limits, in my settings, I can set my range and my motion to, let's say, from 0, from home, that if my router cannot go any further than negative 0.75 inches on the X, or any more than 39 inches on the X, positive side. On the Y, it can only go negative, 1 inch, or to a positive 23 inches. I can set up these soft limits in my software, and when my router reaches that point, it stops. It doesn't. It's almost like having a limit switch, but not. But I have to change those changes. Those settings will change all the time if I'm not working off some type of fixed jig or something. They will change all the time because my XY changes. So my 0 changes, therefore my limits would change and things. And if I'm working off of the center of my board, instead of the bottom left corner, if I'm working off the center and I've got my range set to a X minus of negative 0.75, that's as far as it can go. Well, then when my router's trying to, from the center of that board from 0, when it's trying to go to do the carving and it gets to 0.75, it's going to stop because it hit its limit. Right? It's not going to move. So it's like wait, I can't. How come it's not going all the way over to the 10 inches it needs to carve there and all? Because I have my my soft limits set and all. So the soft limits are good and they're bad. They're good. That if you have some kind of fixed jig or something, they'd be great. So you can always be sure that you don't hit your limits. Running your limits. But they're bad if you're working with a variable off the center of your board or something like that, versus the bottom left corner. Then you have to change those limits every single time you set up a job. Now for me, my jig is always the same on my table, and therefore first thing in the morning I power up my machine. I zero out my machine on the bottom left corner of my jig on my fence, my wedge jig, and for the rest of the day, I only set my X and Y one time for the day, and my soft limits I can set, and they're set off of that 0 position, so I don't ever hit a limit and everything. My Z soft limit may change depending on the thickness of material that I'm carving and all, but as far as my X and Y, it stays pretty much the same. And that's because my setup, I set it up first thing in the morning, and then it's set for the rest of the day for all the jobs I do because I work off that jig. But if I'm doing something where I'm just clamping my board anywhere on the table and I'm working off the center of the board, or on one project I'm working off the bottom left corner, another project the top right corner, whatever, then those soft limits are going to vary. You know what I mean? So they're good and bad. And I will show you this in more detail through the TNG program in a little video. I'll post it in the Facebook. I'll do a little live stream in Facebook and show that, for those of you that are kind of curious about it. Okay, let's get back to the questions. Dave McGinnis, on a model such as a border or a weave, is there a way to avoid the automatic scaling of the inside diameter as well as the overall size as when the overall size is adjusted? Unfortunately, no. Okay. Wow. I got a mess going on here. Let me start a new layer here. All right. So Dave McGinnis's question is when we're working with a model such as a weave, let's imagine this weave border here. This model is set to a certain scale, okay? And therefore, if I change that scale for whatever reason, my width of the weave is going to expand as well. If I try to stretch this, well, not only am I stretching the border, of course, for a rectangle, but the weave itself is stretching. And unfortunately, there is no way around that I'm aware of. Okay? Unfortunately, there is no way around that I'm aware of. So, that was a short but sweet answer. There's no way around. There's no way to avoid it. The only way to avoid it is to have a spire and build your model yourself type of thing, unfortunately. All right, Dave. So, hopefully that answers your question. Let's see here. Dave Kinsey. And my table has a scar to prove topping out the Z is not good. It happens fast. Exactly. Thank you, Dave, for throwing that in there. Ronnie, when inserting your bit into the chuck, should you drop the bit down about 1/16 of an inch? I was told to do this when I use plunge router due to overheating of the armature and the arm and all. And and inserted an O-ring. So yeah, a lot of people use the O-ring trick, Ronnie, on their router bits to prevent the bit going up from somewhere. But you should never, ever, ever fully seat your bit in that collet. Your bit, on my, like for instance, my 60 degree white side 1541 V bit, it's got an overall length of about 2 inches. There's about 1.25 inches, about 2 fingers worth, so probably about 1.25 inches of bit sticking out of the collet, so in the collet there's only about 3/4 inch of bit sticking in there. If I were to fully seat that bit into that collet, then there'd be a good inch or so in there, and it's not good. You don't want to do that. One, you're not going to be able to get a good grip on your router bit when you're tightening down, which could cause bit slippages and things. But a lot of people use the little O-ring trick. They put a little rubber O-ring on their router bit so they know how high to seat their router in and all. The thing with that, I'm assuming, Ronnie, that the O-ring would stay pretty well, where you put it and all, but there's also a chance that it could roll down and things. The real small ones are real tight, they got a pretty good grip and stuff, and all. This is good. The O-rings, the O-ring trick is good for bits in a router table, because at the very top of, right at the router bit head, the shaft flares out to that head. It's got a little taper outward, and you never want to seat down, because then you're gripping on the taper and not the shaft, and that bit's going to be loose. It's going to fly out and all. So the O-ring prevents the bit from being able to go down that low. We have the opposite issue. We're never seating that bit that far down. You should never seat the bit that far down, by the way, in your router. But the O-ring would prevent that, but you're going to have a pretty good. You're only going to have a small amount of shaft up in that collet and everything, and you could place the O-ring on the shaft at a certain position where you don't go up that far. But the O-ring is generally it's a good little trick for router tables and things like that. We're kind of upside down on the CNC because we have more bit and shaft sticking out, protruding down, But also a good little trick. But sometimes it could roll on you a little bit, I guess. I don't know. If it works for you, wonderful. That's a it's a neat little trick. Some people put black marker, permanent marker on their router, and it only goes up to that certain, that little line or dash. The little black marker trick works well for me because I can see if my bit's slipping. If I stop my router and all of a sudden that line on my router bit is 1/8 inch down from the collet, that means my bit has slipped out of the collet by 1/8 inch. You know what I mean? So it's a good little identifier for me that the bit is slipping out and stuff. If I look at my router bit and my line is completely gone, that means it's up in the collet. It means it slipped the other way. It didn't slip out. It got pushed in, and stuff. But I like the little Sharpie marker on the router bit because that helps me identify bit slippages, and stuff if there is any. All right, so let's see what we got going on here. Yeah, Dave, unfortunately, you can't, sometimes you just can't have it all, and when it comes to that, there's no way around it, unfortunately, that I've ever come across, other than being able to make the weave and stuff in Aspire and stuff, All right, ladies and gentlemen, any additional questions? We're at 9:24. I think we'll go another 15 minutes, and we'll call it a night. If there are any additional questions, let me know. And the Sharpie marker. I put a Sharpie marker on my router. That marker, Sharpie marker, when it goes up into the collet, I want to see that marker, at the bottom of the collet. I want to see that mark you know. And as I'm, routing and all, if I pause or stop or something, if I think, man, why is that getting deeper or shallower or something, I can pause and I can look at my router and I can see if my bit has slipped, because my mark is either going to be down or it's going to be up into the collet null, and everything. And it's a quick way to identify if I'm getting some bit slippages, See, with the O-ring, I'd be worried, as if the router was getting pushed up into the collet, the O-ring would just be rolling, it'd be rolling down the shaft, so it really wouldn't be a good identifier that I'm my bit's slipping. And then if that happened and I didn't realize, maybe it was only a little bit, or something, and I take that router out, thinking the O-ring is where it should be and all, I put it back in my little tool set and all, and when I go back to get that, now I'm putting it into the O-ring, and now my O-ring is down, and I didn't realize it got pushed down like the bit got put in, and so therefore, all of a sudden, now my O-ring is not in the right position and stuff like that. So I like the marker thing, but O-ring, either way, whatever works best for you. All right. Any additional questions, ladies and gentlemen? All right. On a scale of 1 to 10, how was the class as far as buffering and audio and things, other than when I'm getting close to the mic and farther from the mic and closer to the mic? Did it stream okay? Any buffering on your side? Any issues or lag that I need to be aware of? And the topic itself, or as far as the answers, let me know how we did. All right. Good, Todd. I like that. Todd kicked it off with a 10. Setting the bar kind of high. Much better tonight. Great. Thank you. I'm slowly trying to hone them in. I think I'm going to end up upgrading to an i7 quad-core, dual-core processor or something. I don't know. Multi-core processor. I don't know. I gotta work my way up to that one. They're expensive. All right, David. All right, Jerry. Way to go. So things are going well. All right. Well, good sound and video tonight. Excellent. Good. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you, Ronnie. Thank you. If there are no other questions, we'll give it a few more minutes, and then. All right, William, good. Yeah, William, I don't know if you were in last week's class or the week before that or the week before that or the week before that. We had some buffering issues, a lot of buffering and stuff. It was my settings and things and stuff, so it was a bad day. It was a bad day. Is Chris Bishop, Chris, are you in class tonight? Chris Bishop, let me see here. Oh, he's going to call me at 10 o'clock tomorrow. Never mind. I was going to show him something if he's going to call me in the morning. So, I'll show him then. All right. Everything went well. Thank you. Okay. Good. All right. Well, listen. I think all the questions are done for tonight. Man, those were pretty good questions, guys and girls. Anything like that. I just want to try to do this every once in a while to help you get past your obstacles and all. And answer some of those questions that have been puzzling you, and you don't be you can make a game out of it. Try to stump Laney kind of thing. Next time we do one of these Q's and A's, because even though I'm not at the machine or don't have TNG, I can do my best to answer. But I'm going to try to where I'd love to be able to start. Streaming sometimes from the shop so I can answer questions at the machine, like CNC questions at the machines and things. That would be awesome. The fourth axis is going great. I got the design for the table legs that I'm going to do. I'm making a miniature little table for shipping purposes to be able to break down and ship easily for display and everything. And it's got some turned legs and stuff. But I've been having some fun. William, with the turnings and the rope twists and the barley twists and things. I've been playing around with the hollow twists. I've been enjoying those. They've been going well and stuff. Good all around. but it's been going good. I got to get them done. October's coming fast, man. I got to get everything done and get shipped up to Burl. So here, because I'm flying to the conference, they're driving. So because we're doing a little display and demo and stuff up there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna keep an eye out for your email and or post in the Facebook group for the survey that I'm gonna have on our possible customer appreciation conferences or training conferences and things that we're going to be doing as Digital Woodcarver, and for some hands-on on-site training and things, and let us know your feedback for that and what your just answer the questions. I'm going to pose some questions in the survey. Do your best to give us some good answers so we can get good feedbacks, because that's going to tell us how we're going to direct this. It's going to be something new for us. We've been debating on doing it for a couple of years now. We want to get out there in the field and start doing this and working with our customers, kind of hands-on and things. So it's going to be a new thing for us, and we need all the feedback we can. So be sure to keep an eye out and be sure to help us out by answering those surveys and stuff. It's not going to be like hundreds. It's going to be like one survey, whether it comes in your email or posted on the Facebook group. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Am I going to Boone, North Carolina at the end of October? I'm going to be in Hickory, North Carolina for the Woodworking Extravaganza, the Klingspor Woodworking Extravaganza. What's happening in Boone, North Carolina? I'm not sure. But I'll be in Hickory, North Carolina in October for the Klingspor Woodworking Extravaganza. So, all right, everybody. Thank you very much, and y'all have a wonderful, wonderful night. Oh, Todd, what? Real quick, Todd, what is the conference about and when? Which conference? The Vetric conference, or our conference? Yes, I will be at Peter. I will be in Hickory at the Klingspor Woodworking Extravaganza. Todd, which conference were you referring to? The Vetric conference in Chicago is going to be, Vetric training and everything, and there'll be a couple of, guest speakers and all. Our conference is, we talked about it at the beginning of the class. We're going to do a couple of locations throughout the U.S. We're going to start off with Florida and then Indiana. But 2-day conference where customers can come out, get some hands-on training. We're going to do some advanced training and things, some maintenance tips and tricks with Burl and the guys. We're going to have a couple of machines, do some hands-on training, some class training, some projects training and stuff, and just all around, gathering, of all the customers and stuff for those 2 days and all. And it'll be about, a fee of about $150 to attend. That covers, food, drinks, and beverages and things like that during the conference and all. And but yeah, it'll be, that's what it's about. And there'll be more information in the post I'm going to post in the Facebook group, Todd. So you'll see that there. All right, everybody. Y'all have a wonderful night, and thank you again. Good night, guys.